5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, friends, for another great episode of People and Profits. From today's guest, I'm sure you should keep your notebook pen ready because at the end of 35 minutes, I can ensure each one of you will have minimum 5 big takeaways for you being a founder or a startup enthusiast from a global entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, a dear friend, Anindya Datta. Thank you so much, Anindya, for being with us.
This is awesome, Gaurav. Thanks for having me.
So let's start from the beginning, Anindya. You grew up in India, went to IIT Kharagpur, one of the toughest schools to get into. What was your childhood like? Were you always the smart kid, or did you sort of think of something specific which you pushed towards engineering and technology?
So the honest answer, so you asked, your question had two or three parts, right? So whether I was a smart kid was, so my childhood was very, very, very typical, middle class Indian, middle class Bengali childhood, right? I mean, I did not grow up in a lot of affluence, no, but we were fine, right? My dad was a pretty senior exec in a multinational company, which was very well known at that time. I don't think it exists anymore, called Shaw Wallace, right? And we used to live in Baliganj, and I grew up very, very, very sort of typical middle class Indian, right? At home, at home, the focus was sort of study, 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 right? So growing up in that environment, but yes, I was good in studies. Okay, if I told you I was not, I'd be lying. I used to do well in school, but you know we all grow up with this notion of this classic good boy, right? They study, they go to school, they come back, they listen to people. So I was not like that, right, at all. And again, there are some stories which we can't even share with your audience. But I used to be, I used to have this sort of this dichotomy, right? I was a naughty boy. My parents would get called over from school sometimes because I would do things that. But I was also good in studies, right? So that's what I wanted to point out. So I was not your classical good boy, but yes, I used to do well in school, but I used to be quite rambunctious, and I used to create trouble as well. And then
So,
then then you asked me about IIT. Yeah, so you know. To be absolutely honest with you, Gaurav, when I grew up, things have changed a lot since then. So I'm talking about the 80s, right? So when I grew up, in India, uh, the thing was, you growing up middle class, if you want to make a good living, you become an engineer or a doctor, right? I mean, that was the one of two things. So again, I would be lying if I told you I had this incredible affinity for technology, and no, I did not, right? I was relatively good in studies. I you know I knew I didn't want to study medicine. In fact, I don't know how it works in India now. During when I was going to school, you had to study biology for going into medicine because you had to take that exam, right? I didn't
right.
study biology, so I was pretty much left with, hey, engineering or go do BSc. So I took the IIT exam. To my surprise, I did pretty well and went. So very much formulaic, very much sort of going with the grain. The only thing is that I was not your classical sort of good boy. I used to get into trouble a lot.
So you mentioned about your family background, a typical Bengali mindset, a Bengali background. I mean, leaving after doing IIT, leaving for the University of Maryland for your MS and PhD, was that decision an easy decision for a Bengali parent?
You know, again, I'll take you back to things have changed now. Okay, Gaurav. When I was going to IITs, which is mid to late 80s, right? I went to grad school during the 90s, right? So I'm talking about the late 80s. Um, I'm much older than most of your audience, I'm sure. From the IITs, there was this stream of people going to the States, right? So I do not know the exact stats, Gaurav. I would say that probably 80% of in India we do formulaic things like when you're growing up is engineering or medicine. When you're in IIT, you either go abroad for grad school or you take the IIMs. At that time, those were the two sort of. So I did both, right? I did both, and I got into grad school. Got again, not with any great idea that hey, I need to go and do this. It's everybody's doing that, let me also apply. I got in and I'll go, right? So until that time my life was very sort of be part of the gang, do what most people around me are doing.
I can completely relate to it. I mean, similar things must be happening with 90% and more of the kids going with where the actual gang is going. Similar things happen in our chartered accountancy too. Super. Now, you became a professor at Georgia Tech, University of Arizona, and Bell Labs, teaching AI and data management. This was the 90s. You said early 90s,
This
right?
was this was so this is mid 90s then, right? This is
Mid
so I've
90s.
got my PhDs mid 90s.
Got it. And before
Yeah.
actually AI became a buzzword, which people all across are talking today. So, what were you teaching back then, which probably people have realized now?
So I grew up in the dark days of AI, Gaurav. So I did my PhD in AI like things. I ended up teaching AI, ended up doing research on AI. I've always done things at the intersection of AI and data, but AI was not the sort of this incredibly sexy thing that it is now, right? It was not at all. In fact, I still remember that, and people who are sort of my ilk and have come through the technology world will recognize this, especially if you've gone to, if you've done computer science, that among other fields like database systems, computer vision, AI was looked down upon. You know, my friends would tell me. I still remember my roommate who's done extremely well after that. Telling yeah, AI kuch nahi banega. I mean, AI will amount to nothing, right?
Oh,
So yeah, and for a long time it did not, because the idea of AI, all AI is the same. I mean, we talk of generative AI now, LLMs, everybody talks about that, but that's a tiny, tiny, tiny part of AI, right? AI is much broader. But regardless of what AI you do, I mean, at the end, the goal is, you learn something from a large amount of data and then you predict something, right? One of the biggest problems that we had when I was young, and is just that learning takes so much compute power. It was not possible to feed because it was so expensive, right? So everything that we would end up doing, we'd end up doing on tiny amounts of training and compute, and so the results were not good. Then came the explosion, and everybody knows of Nvidia now, and then came the explosion of cheap computing, all these cloud systems, and now I still remember that when I was in my 20s, we were working on identifying cats and dogs from pictures, right? It was so hard. And even at that time, we knew if I can train this thing on like 10 billion pictures, it'll get better. But we were not able to because it's so expensive, right? So you train something on like 10,000 pictures and it would not be good. So yeah, so all of this I'm saying that AI as a field has changed so much, simply not because the underlying science has changed, but simply because the underlying science was good, and now you can execute the science at scale.
In fact, the example which you gave of cat and dog, last week only, I was on day 11th to teach kids, about AI. So those are kids near my area, can say lesser privileged people. So ChatGPT also through the same example of AI, how multiple pictures can be recognized, cats and dogs can be through multiple data sets, right? So those are probably the basics which you pointed out.
Those are some of the first problems of AI, right? Image recognition. Can I
Right.
recognize a car? Can I recognize a human? Can I
Correct.
recognize a bird? Can I recognize a cat? Yeah. So those are the first problems that sort of
True.
we worked on. Yeah.
Got it.
You
So
know,
you were on.
you know of captchas, right, Gaurav? You know, we all go through captchas, right?
Yes.
Soon and soon AI will be able to fool captchas. So captchas work very well now, but soon will come. Like captcha will tell you, point all the pictures that have part or all of a traffic light, right? Soon
Mhm.
AI will be able to fool captchas.
Oh, that will be scary. More scary things coming up. Now, you were up for a comfortable career, academic career, I should say, tenure, research, and training. What made you leave that world and jump into the startup zone?
Yeah, that's this is where sort of everything in my life until then has been very follow the crowd. People study. You do engineering or medicine, go to engineering. In IIT, everybody goes to the States, go to the States. Do your PhD, get into become a professor at a good school, right? So then my life changed a lot, Gaurav, right? And to be absolutely honest with you, I don't know how much I was responsible for it. I was I was very inspired, or I was working on a on again, I don't want to nerd out on the problems I was working on, but I was sort of working on problems of sort of doing data and AI at scale, and my work very accidentally got noticed by a fairly famous gentleman called Vinod Khosla, who was then at a venture firm called Kleiner Perkins, and he said, "Hey, you got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this." And in many ways, inspired by him, Chutney was to a large extent inspired by him, and it was, probably the person that was affected the most was my mother, right? I mean, here is a, you know, good son, all the stuff that people are proud of to say their son has done. He's done. He went to IIT, then he got his PhD, and now he's like, he's left and he's running a company called Chutney. My mother was very, in fact, my mother actually, how Indian mothers are. She said, "Oh, I'm falling sick. I'll have a heart attack." Blah blah. At that time she was also very young, right? She was barely in her late 40s, and I don't know how she could have a heart attack at that time. But yeah, so that's the story of how I started.
Super. Now, Chutney, a typical Indian name for a Silicon Valley startup. I mean, it got acquired successfully by Cisco in 2005. That's, according to normal definition, definitely a successful exit. But what is your definition of a successful exit? That is first part of my question. Second is, what's more interesting after selling is you didn't jump into your next startup. You took a break to spend time with your daughter. That's super rare for entrepreneurs. Why did you do that?
Again, many part question, right? So let me try to parse that question and answer each part. So what does an exit mean for me? To be absolutely honest, Gaurav, if you had asked me that question in 2005 when the transaction was happening, my answer would be very different than what it is now, right? I mean, you have to put that in the context of, Georgia Tech is in Atlanta, right? I was, I started Chutney in Atlanta. Yes, moved to Silicon Valley, but outside of the valley at that time, startups were a fairly new thing, right? In the year 2000, Netscape had barely gone public. Google was not yet there. So this whole notion of that you do startups was very much a Silicon Valley thing, not so much outside of a valley thing. So quite honestly, Gaurav, I didn't know a whole lot, right? I was learning as I was doing chutney. And for me, hey, I mean, boy, Cisco did this partnership, and then it was amazing at that time, right? And uh, so what I'm going to are you asking the Anindo of 2005 this question, or are you asking the Anindo of 2025 the question? Which one are you asking?
Both. First of 2005, because that will give a real picture of how an entrepreneur can crave for. And today, of course, the materialism of that particular exit will be hitting much lesser, I presume.
Yeah, so the me of 2005 was thrilled, Gaurav, thrilled, right? I mean, it was a new kind of high, right? And again, you yourself are too young to remember, but the first real technology downturn happened between 2000 and 2004. It was known as the dot-com crash, right? I mean, valuations, the NASDAQ tumbled like 60%. It was very, very, very bad, right? So in many ways, while chutney was formed at the height of the bubble, chutney was built when things were crumbling down, right? So the expected, I'm giving you the perspective of Anindya of 2005, right? It was a very difficult time to build companies, and in many ways we had this fantastic investors who were able to raise money, but it was a catastrophic time to be a technology. Lots of startups died, lots of VC firms died. So going from that to this was a huge thing, right? And we won't talk about what it was sold for. It was sold for a bunch of money, but in today's terms, it will not. But at that time, in that context, it seemed like a fantastic. Everybody was very happy. Okay. If you ask me now, I your parameters change, right? It's like, I don't know. It's like eating ice cream, Gaurav, right? So when we were young, we would go to the ice cream parlors and have ice cream and the quality thing, and that was like incredible, right? I mean, that was the only thing that was available. But as you grow up and you taste different kind of ice creams, your taste in ice cream changes, and now I like Haagen-Dazs chocolate ice cream, right? So it's like that, right? So your intellectual basis, in the case of ice cream, your taste buds drive your intellect. In the case of startups, it's sort of, you go through other things, you do other things, you meet people. So yeah, I mean, now my perspective has changed a lot, right? So what I do Mobile Walla now, and I a similar kind of exit for Mobile Walla. Yeah, I mean, exit is always good. I mean, the people that have backed you, you make them money. I would love to be able to, as a fiduciary, I would love to be able to make my investors a lot more money than at that time. These days, I also care less. Entrepreneurs are lying when they say they don't care about money. Of course, at the end, that's the currency with which you measure. But I definitely care about that less, right? Now, it's impact, right? What is the impact I'm having, right? Am I building something durable? How many people am I making wealthy? How many families am I impacting? Those things matter a lot more to me now. So those are the kind of, hopefully this makes sense, Gaurav.
Of course, it does.
Yeah.
It does. It definitely gives a good high to the listeners, especially those who are founders, to get a real scenario as well as real perspective of how a founder should ideally feel over the years, and also during that time itself, very practically being high about making money for himself, his team members, and also for his investors. Logical, pretty logical. Now, the second part of the question was related to you taking a hiatus, a break itself.
Yes. And again, it was a product of the circumstances, Gaurav. So when I was building Chutney, right? Eventually, Kleiner Vinod, one day said you got to move to the Bay Area, right? At that time, this is the time when my wife is a teacher. She's a very dedicated teacher, and in the U.S. at least, teaching, you just can't uproot, go somewhere else. You need state licenses, blah blah. It's not like being an accountant that you can just go to another place and be an accountant, right? And my daughter was also very small, right? So when I was, she was barely born when I started, and when I sold it, she was like 6 years old, right? So during this time, so we started off by saying that, okay, I'll go there, I'll look for a house. We had bought a house in Atlanta, we have to sell it, we have to. So I said, I'll go there. So for a few months, it would be like I would go to the Bay. I'd fly into San Francisco from Atlanta on a Monday, and then leave on like Thursday night. Like I'd take the red eye in, so I came back to Atlanta on Friday. So this is also very hard, right? I mean, it's a very long distance. It's like from Kolkata to Dubai. I mean, imagine doing that over and over again, right? In fact, it's probably even slightly longer, right? So we would always, okay, let's move. Teacher sessions go from like, even in India, sort of it. Summer vacation ends in on August. It starts, and then again, summer vacation starts next May, right? So we were like, okay, we'll go next May, and then what would happen is Chutney was close to being acquired by a bunch of different companies, right? There was a time that, okay, EMC, I don't know if you remember the company EMC, very large
Mhm.
company, right?
Yes.
So EMC might acquire us, and then I was talking to the EMC people, and they said, okay, you guys got to move to Boston, right? Because EMC was headquartered. So then the thing was, so San Francisco jaake kya fayda? I mean, if you have to move to Boston in 6. So all of these things kept happening, right? And my wife and my daughter never moved. So what happened, Gaurav, is one of the and this has in many ways affected my relationship with my daughter, I think, greatly. I was there for her very little in that time. I mean, imagine, and these are formative years, and so she spent a lot of time with her mother, but I was
Right.
only seeing her. So after I sold, and I did a 1 year lockup in Cisco, right? So I left on like the 365th day, and then I came back to Atlanta, and then um, I just obsessively spent time with my daughter. I mean, she was 6 years old at that time, right? So just spend a lot of time, and that is, hopefully that answers your question. I gave you the context
Yes.
of
Of
why
course,
why
it does.
yeah. Yeah.
It does. It certainly does. So it was more of a fatherly emotion,
It
and
was very it
partly
was
the guilt of not staying with her for a longer duration of 0 to 6 years, kind of, that
That's
sort
right.
of prompted you to take that call. Makes
Correct.
sense. Now let's talk about the birth of your next child, Mobile Wala. Right? I was actually reading about the birth itself. Like during those 4 years itself, your daughter was obsessed with this game called Doodle Jump on her iPod, and
That's right.
somehow that obsession led to Mobile Wala, which is now a company tracking 2.2 billion devices globally. Now, how did a kids game become a multi-million dollar data company? If we can break that down for our people.
Yeah. So again, that's a great question, right? And when you ask the question, it somehow seems, oh, doodle jump data, but there was a big arc, right? Significant arc of happenings that kind of led. So um, so, and again, you are too young for this, Gaurav. Do you remember what was your what phone do you have now? Do you have an iPhone?
No, I am a Samsung user.
Okay, yeah. So I am a Samsung user as well. But
Okay.
the first the first device that really they came up with was called the iPod. I don't know if you even remember.
Yes,
It was basically a music.
was an iPod user. I was an iPod user.
So it's a music device where and then if you remember the first sort of the current iPhone form factor that Apple came up with, I bought my daughter. She used to iPod. Then I bought her. It was not a phone yet. It was, but they launched the iTunes store. It had a bunch of games, so you could listen to music and play
Correct.
games, right?
Yes.
And she, I still remember vividly. This is like 2007, right? And there are like 40,000 games or 40,000 apps, I forget, Gaurav. 40,000 apps, I think, in total on iTunes. And of course, most of them are games, right? And people are like, oh my God, so many. Now there are many tens of millions, right? So they found this game called Doodle Jump, would play it, and it is like little girls that would come and play Doodle Jump. I don't even know if it still exists now or not. Probably it does. So I would ask them, why do you play this all the time? They say, oh, it's so much fun. And I would tell them that but there are so many others, right? And what they said was sort of super interesting. They said, oh, how do we know what, we tried a couple of others and it was not as much fun. So how do we find, we would love to find another fun game like Doodle Jump. So my idea initially had nothing to do with Mobile Wala was now. I said, wow, this millions and millions of kids playing this. And search is a big problem, right? So Google was already pretty big. They'd just gone public in 2005, right? But still, Google search, you couldn't go into Google and say, hey, in the iTunes store, what games are like Doodle Jump or as much fun as Doodle Jump, right? So I thought that it might be interesting. Google was still a very, what is known as syntactic search, right? I mean, you would say, hey, I want to learn about, I don't know, protein in bananas, right? And basically it would go and search for documents that had the phrase protein in bananas or had protein or had bananas. It would match strings, right?
The keyword search.
Keyword search, right?
Yeah.
It would not. It is still not doing meaning-based search, right? So
Right.
and this question, like what is fun like Doodle Jump, is a very meaning question, like semantics question. So initially
Contextual.
my idea was, can we go and use AI to define to create a entirely new search paradigm. And I thought that it would be interesting the first application area would be apps, right? So Mobile Wallet didn't exist, so I started this search engine called Wordster, WORDSTER, which is which eventually, after I'll give you the short version. So in Wordster, you could go and you could ask these things, like, find me apps like Doodle Jump. People that like Doodle Jump, what else do they like, right? And in order to do that, we were trying to, we were kind of gathering data from the app stores and reviews and other things, and a ton of data, putting it together, and very quickly, Wordster became it was one of the most used app search engines, right? In fact, we started doing app rankings and things like New York Times. New York Times has this every week they publish this top music from top movies. They started publishing top apps from Wordster, right? In fact, if you type things like my name, and New York Times, you'll see coverage we got at that time and so on, right? But one of the things, and all of this, Gaurav, was happening on my money, right? We had not, this was sort of me, a couple of guys, in Singapore working and India working away. So that was the start of what eventually became Mobile Wallet. We did that for a few years. But after 2-3 years, I could see that monetizing would be hard. It's a very useful service. A lot of people are using it. Because at the end, Google is Google, because tens of billions of searches happen on all kinds. Tens of billions of searches don't happen for App Store. It's just not going to happen. it's a unless we could. I could see that making Worcester a large company would be hard. So then my question was, okay, all this data that we have gathered of how people are using apps and by extension mobile devices, what and that, mobile was getting big, right? And I could see that mobile devices could be used to figure out where people were going, what they're eating, what stores they're visiting, all, and that one thing led to another. The data that we have started collecting from Worcester, other ideas, and eventually became what Mobile Walla. But the Worcester phase itself was quite long, right? I was very emotionally attached to Worcester as well, but at one point we decided to shut it down, right? Because we just couldn't do both. There was some are you doing Worcester? Are you doing this? You go ask for money. They say, hey, you can't be doing that and this. So then sort of Mobile Walla happened.
Awesome. Now, coming to the Kolkata and the Bengal connection, you often come to Kolkata. We spoke maybe as an annual affair, you come here because your family is here. What keeps pulling you back? And when you're here, what do you see in the city that the business world might be missing?
So part one, how often am I coming to? So I come to Kolkata a lot, Gaurav. I mean, I come to Kolkata probably. I mean, this year probably I've already come 10 times. I come 10 to 15 times a year, right? Not for very long periods of time. One reason is of course my family. My brother lives in the States now, but my parents lived here. My dad passed away in 2020. My mother is here. I'm sort of super attached to them, and you know how Indians are. I mean, elder son, that's your mathe pe likha hai. That's your responsibility, right? So that's so that. But also, all my companies have had significant presence in Kolkata, right? I mean, Mobile Walla's biggest office is in Kolkata, and this is not a back office, right? This is not somewhere. So we have key engineers, key data scientists. We recruit from the IITs, for instance. They come and work here, and so on, right? So I come here to work as well. I mean, there are a few days that I work out of our Kolkata office, hang out with the people. So all of these now, and I'm going to now kind of glide over to the next part of your question. What do I think of Kolkata? So clearly not even the biggest lover of Kolkata, and you can count me as one of them, right? I mean, I have deep connections to the city, spiritual connection, emotional connection, but not even the biggest lover of Kolkata, in which you can, of course, count me, as I told you, would say that building a great technology company in Kolkata is easy. It's not. It's simply not, right? I mean, imagine this, Gaurav, that when I first opened up the first office for Chutney in Kolkata, right? People talk of venture capital these days and all this venture capital that goes into Bangalore and so on. At that time, I don't know how many, 2000, 2001, how many startups existed in India, or, how many US startups were doing things in India. Not many, right? I mean, and Kolkata, and a lot of the venture capital I was raising there from this top tier venture capitalists was coming to Kolkata, right? Because we are getting good people. So I have been involved in sort of flowing high quality money and building high quality teams in Kolkata for a long time. It's very hard. It's extremely hard because, and I'm going to give you a two-part answer to this. I'm now talking about somebody building a technology company, right? And by technology company, I'm not talking a services company, a deep technology company that is actually doing hardcore computer science to solve hard problems. Right? So one of the things that you need to do that is an ecosystem of other companies from where you can hire. I mean, why did Silicon Valley become Silicon Valley? Because if you start a company and you want a very talented marketer who can market your product, there are 20 other companies that have done the same thing you're doing. And there are people who have trained in that, and you can hire from there, right? In Kolkata, that doesn't exist, right? So in many ways, building teams in Kolkata is like either you hire somebody super young and you train them, or but you don't always have the luxury to do that, right? I mean, you need senior people, or you hire from outside and you move them to Kolkata, right? So to some extent, we have been successful in doing that, clearly. Um, um, uh, but I like to think, Gaurav, that again, we are not a very sort of PR focused company. So if and this has got nothing to do with translating to money. One of my proudest accomplishments is, I think, that I run a company that has probably a very, very core important team out of Kolkata. These are very talented people. They could be anywhere in the world, but they choose to be in Kolkata because of this. They get paid as much as they would get paid in Bombay, or we don't make and that's one of my proudest achievements. And I always hope that what I'm doing, hopefully, is helping these people. You know, as you build teams, they can nobody expects that somebody's going to stay with you forever, right? That they learn what they learn, they go out, they do other things, they contribute to the community, so on and so forth. So that's one of my I'm very proud of that.
I loved that piece of, maybe we say in our terms ghar vapsi, or a reverse migration kind of a thing, to hold back talent to their hometowns, and that itself, I mean, may have helped you retain people for a longer duration as well, and they might have stayed faithful to you for a pretty long time. As you said,
That's
for
absolutely.
multiple companies, they have stayed with you. That's a good testimony to the city of joy.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now let's talk about something new that you're building, Fit Green, a food business aiming to be the next Kava, or maybe I should say Kava will be known by the name Fit Green. I'm pretty sure on that. That's a completely different industry from data and AI, right? What's that story, and why food, and why now?
Yeah, so you're very kind saying Kava will be known. I would be thrilled if I can build something 1/10 the size of Kava. In terms of value, I'm talking about in terms of value. So yeah, that's it's and this is a business, Gaurav. And one of the things I've learned is in building companies for a long time is that it helps to know what you're doing, right? It really helps to know, right? You never know everything, but once you have made 100 mistakes, you hopefully don't make them again, right? I mean, there are 300 new mistakes to make, but at least you've covered 100 mistakes that you've already made before. This is a business that I don't know, so I keep making mistakes every day, right? All the mistakes are new, but it comes from, I'm a relatively sort of health focused, wellness focused guy, right? I play sports, and you have seen me. I'm a very fit person. I play a bunch of sports. And like all entrepreneurs, I lead a stressful life. So one of the things that hopefully helps me maintain my energy level so one of the very important things as part of that, Gaurav, is what you eat, right? In fact, I based on my many years of sort of dabbling around, I think how much I work out impacts 10% of how I feel. What I eat impacts 90% of what I feel, right? I don't mean to say don't work out. Of course, exercise is very important. That 10%, but what you eat is like the most important thing, right? Uh,
Correct.
and it impacts your everyday life, right? I mean, how much energy do you feel? Can you play with your kids? Can everything? So one of the things that and I spend some time in Singapore each year as well. And there's a particular eating pattern that I have. It's nothing very special. Okay, I eat a lot, but I try to eat. I try to eat protein. I try to eat like green vegetables. I try to eat complex carbs. Not a lot of like just white rice, for instance, right? So easy to do in the States, of course. In a place like Kava, for instance, you can cook it. Easy to do in Singapore, but not so easy to do in India. Again, but there's only so much biryani you can eat, right? So one of the things when I come to Kolkata, or this is true even when I go to Delhi. I mean, I travel in India quite a bit. It's just not super easy. It's very easy to eat tasty, very tastiest food in the world, right? But after you have had butter chicken for 3 days, you are. So one of the things I've always thought, hey, is why isn't there a place here where I can eat, right? So now, long answer to your question. So Fit Green is that place, right? So I finally thought, let me start something where I can eat when I come home.
Yes, and for the viewers and followers out here, must visit place. I have been fortunate to attend even the very close knitted initial meetings about the mission vision of Fit Green, and also I mean would surely recommend people to visit if you are about fitness, health, as well as good taste.
Couldn't have pitched it better myself, Gaurav. Thanks for everybody. Go check it out. Have the food.
Yes. Yes. Now, Anindu, for Indian founders trying to build global companies, what's the playbook? How do you think global while building from India?
Yeah. So good, very good question. And almost everything I'll tell you is, almost everything I've told you until now is data driven, right? I've told you this is data that I have perceived. Here, not a lot of examples, right? I don't think you can come up with 100 examples of companies that started and let's ignore TCS and Wipro and Infosys, right? They have a particular model and so on, but not a lot of examples. So let me tell you sort of certain focus that I have had. I'm an Indian who's built companies outside of India, right? So the issue is, what would I do if I build that in India, right? So here are the things that I sometimes find missing in the startup scenario in India, though India has one of the most vibrant sort of at least startup ecosystems in the world. So one is and again very focus on innovation, right? Let's take an example of I'll give you the example of foundational AI LLMs, right? Um, if you look at sort of Indians are very good in AI, honestly, right? I mean, you look at Perplexity, you look at the guy that just left. I forget what his name is. Intel to become the AI chief at OpenAI, right? So in terms of pure technical expertise and technical business expertise in AI, I often wonder why a foundation LLM didn't start from India, right? I mean, I don't think. Again, it's my opinion. I think sort of foundational LLM, the horizontal AI, has kind of passed us by. I think now building one more thing probably is, but I think there was a tremendous opportunity, let's say 4, 5, 6 years ago, and India offers an incredible opportunity for LLMs. It's a multilingual country, right? And so it's a anyway. But and again, I think the reason is not because we don't know how to do it. Of course we do. Uh, I think the reason is that somehow in the Indian ecosystem, the focus is how to quickly succeed, and perhaps not sort of or I mean, clearly the meaning of jugaad, right? So innovational foundational innovations are the opposite of jugaad, right? I mean, a lot of trying and failing, I mean, imagine you see Claude and GPT and what you don't see is the 400 other LLMs that have failed, right? I mean, ton of money has been wasted, right? That in India, I think, is a hard model to, and until that model happens, when people just go and take wild swings, right? Basically, you are going to bat only to hit sixes, right? I no singles and doubles. That mentality until it happens. Yeah. So 20 people go in, 19 people will get out second ball, right? Clearly, but that is definitely something that I would love to see, and that's what build global companies, right? When you make foundational advancements into something, and then everybody has to have it, right? But that needs a bunch of failings, and I think in the Indian startup ecosystem, we still don't look at failure with the same kindness that we would look at it, let's say in the States, right? So that is something I'll bring out.
And in fact, to top up to what you actually mentioned, since we are talking about people and profits, I always believe people come before profits. And yesterday's newspaper article says India has 16% of global AI talent. That itself says a lot, like what potential it has to come up with global AI companies. Maybe,
Absolutely.
places like Kolkata, Bardhaman, Patna, Bhubaneswar, Balasore, all these places might have talent who are sitting there, and they can probably build something really large, humongous.
Absolutely, and and this thing that you said, I can totally believe it, that India has 16% of AI talent. AI is a talent game, right? I mean, you
Yes.
can come up with a brilliant idea, but until you're going to execute on it, right? And we definitely have a skew on our side with regard to talent. But I can tell you, Gaurav, that unless sort of our some base impulses, I go out, I do something, and knowing that I might fail. This is something, I've looked at a lot of startup, lot of founders in India. This whole thing of, hey, I might fail, doesn't risk taking, right? Like risk taking is definite. Yeah.
Sounds very simple, but quite deep in a way. Like maybe before jumping into anything, they are getting into the analysis paralysis and maybe not even taking that leap of faith and that jump to build that up as well. I loved that piece, made a note like, innovation or foundational innovation is essentially the opposite of jugaad, which
Yeah.
we are very proud of.
Totally right. I mean, it's exactly the
Correct.
opposite of jugaad. I mean, you can't
Absolutely.
innovate using jugaad. You just
Correct.
cannot.
Correct. Now, Nindu, you have built multiple companies, three in numbers. So, what has been your top learning while building these companies, which you can share with the listeners that okay, these are the top two or three things, which is a no-brainer. Please learn it from me instead of falling yourself.
I don't know top two. The top thing I've learned, Gaurav, the number one thing I've learned, which I now religiously, it's all about people. It's all about people, right? Fit Green, I'll give you an example of Fit Green. Fit Green, if you look at the base proposition of Fit Green, you were part of that small group originally, if you remember that evening at
Of
my
course.
home.
Yes.
All that stuff and all that pictures I drew and numbers I showed mean nothing if I don't have the right people to. It doesn't mean you hire a big team, right? Hiring one good person is better than hiring 10 sort of. And again, here I'm not. So people is everything, Gaurav, everything. You can't do anything by yourself, and if you have the right people around you. And also remember, so this is one. And the second thing I'll tell you, which is also another learning for me, you never end up doing what you start off doing. I have been part of three companies myself. Well, FitGreen is too new. I mean, we still do what we did 2 months ago. But the other companies I've done, the companies I've invested in, the VCs that have invested in me send companies to me for due diligence. I follow them. Very, very, very rarely will you find a company doing, like OpenAI doesn't do today what it had in its plan 6 years ago. Okay, this is something. So and so these are the two most important things: doing the right pivots and hiring the right people. And if you hire the right people, you'll do the right pivots. Right. So those are the two most important things about building companies.
Lovely. And what is that hardest thing about being a founder which nobody talks about?
I could give you like 20 different things. I don't know. Probably, I can give you sort of very practical business, but in this forum, let me give a different perspective. I think the hardest thing about being a founder is, at the end, one of the most comfortable things is to find that somebody else shares the pain that you have, right? It's misery loves company. There is a saying, right? And you have toothache, right? It just you're like, oh my God, my teeth are hurting. But then your mother tells you, oh yeah, I've had it many times, and this whole thing of empathy and one of the hardest things about being a founder is that, at least for me, I'm often faced with situations where there is no company. So I'm completely alone by my, in fact, going and talking to other people, they can't, often, it's the frame of reference is different, right? So that's probably the hardest thing, that it's a very, very solitary, very, I don't know what word is lonely, but lonely sounds too, clearly you are not lonely in the sense you have a lot of people around you, but in your head and in your heart, it's a very, very solitary thing, which can be very hard.
Thank you so much, Anindya. The last 50 plus minutes flew like a breeze, and I'm pretty sure that it turned out to be a masterclass for all of at least for me, and probably the listeners who will come up, who will probably listen to this podcast multiple times to understand the depth of each of the answers, what you essentially gave. Thank you so much for sharing those nuggets of wisdom, Anindya. And looking forward to meet you very, very soon. Thank you again.
29th, I'm there 29th to the 2nd.
Sure. Looking forward.
Okay.
Looking forward.
Thank you, Gaurav, and thank you. I really enjoyed this takes me back also. It's like, it didn't feel like a podcast. It felt like an Adda session between you and me, right? That's what, yeah.
Yes, you have always been generous, kind. Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Job हो या business की need, regex से मिले perfect speed, faster hiring बिना delay, career और growth का easy way.
Regex, smart hiring का perfect formula.